So let's talk about what came out yesterday from Adam Schefter about the Packers and Jayden Reed. He shared this on X. Packers GM Brian Gutekunst met last week with Jayden Reed's agent Drew Rosenhaus to clarify the wide receiver status in Green Bay after the team drafted Matthew Golden and Savion Williams. The team said it will not affect Reed's status as its top receiver per source. The reason this is so surprising or shocking is because for the past couple years, 2023 and 2024, the Packers coaches, the Packers front office has never come out publicly and crowned one of these receivers as the top guy, the number one guy. In Green Bay, ever since Davante Adams left, the question was always arising, as it did a majority of last season, even into this offseason as well. Who is the number one guy? Who's the best player on this Packers team? And the reality was that it was more of a committee in 2023 and 2024. The ball was spread out a ton. That was one of the things that the Packers looked at, I think, as a strength for a lot of the year, was because teams didn't, have to, or there wasn't one guy who teams had to key in on like other teams. When you have a top star, top tier receiver, then teams will put a lot of the focus there. The Packers just had the ability to take more of a committee approach. And so that was just what the Packers had said publicly for a long time. They had never come out and made any kind of bold claim about someone being a top receiver. So that's why this is somewhat surprising, because it definitely changes at least what's been put out, publicly about what the Packers think. Now, here's the thing why I'm not quite sure if I'm buying this information. I think with a lot of these reports, I'd say a lot of the time it's true, but sometimes I do wonder when it comes to wording and phrasing and things like that, is this exactly what the Packers said? Because when you look at this, he says the team said it will not affect Reed's status as its top receiver, as if they've always or have seen him recently as a top receiver. And so as I was thinking through this, because if this is 100% what the Packers said, if they said directly to Drew Rosenhaus, who is Jayden Reed's agent, this does not change the fact that Jayden Reed is our top receiver. I would be shocked that they said that, honestly. But if that's what they said, then this does change a lot of things. But here's one thing I was wondering as I was thinking through the situation. So Drew Rosenhaus and Brian Gutekunst having a discussion. My first question is, who initiated this meeting? I doubt it would be Brian Gutekunst, because why would he? I mean, it could be. But my guess would be it's Rosenhaus initiating this meeting. I don't know who did or who didn't, but that's somewhat important. We don't know. It's hard when you have, two sentences to know exactly what happened. But I was trying to think, is there a possibility where maybe things were taken in such a way that it could be used to come out like this, where maybe the Packers didn't exactly say that? I wonder if that's a possibility. So one thing I was wondering is, if you were Drew Rosenhaus, Jayden Reed's agent, and your goal is to get Jayden Reed the most money possible, he's going to be entering his third season in the NFL, and because he was not a first-round pick, that means that there is no fifth-year option that the Packers have the ability to try to put him on after year 3, which happens with first-round picks. And so that means that Jayden Reed, after this season, after 2025, heading into 2026, that would be his final year of his deal. And so lots of non-first-round picks, especially when you look at receivers, guys who weren't first-round picks, end up getting an extension after year 3 if they're really solid. Guys like DK Metcalf, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Nico Collins, because you don't have that ability as a team to secure them with that fifth-year option. And so that's why lots of times these deals happen after year 3. So if you're Drew Rosenhaus, your goal is to make Jayden Reed a lot of money. And so you probably want to make sure that the Packers still are having Jayden Reed as a important piece of their future heading into 2025 and 2026. So I did wonder if they're having this conversation. If you're Rosenhaus and you look at the stats from the past 2 years, it is true that Jayden Reed has led the Packers receivers in receiving yards the past 2 years. So in a way, you could already say he's a top receiver statistically, even though I think when people are talking about this, we're not meaning necessarily statistically, because he's barely been the top receiver. I think that it just comes down to like the overall perspective and how does the team see it. And I wonder if he could have said, will drafting these 2 receivers change Jayden Reed's role in 2025? The Packers could have said no And then Drew Rosenhaus could say, see, look, he's still going to be the top receiver just like he was the past 2 years in receiving yards. So I just wonder if that's exactly what was said, or if there could have been some kind of question about it affecting Jayden Reed's role, and the Packers saying, no, it's not going to affect his role. And then in turn, Rosenhaus says potentially that, that could make him continue to be the top receiver. Now, as I said, I don't know if any of this is the case. This is just me speculating and trying to figure out exactly what's happening here, because the reason I would be surprised if Gutekunst actually said this in a meeting is because he would have to know the kind of drama, I guess you could say, it could cause in a lot of different ways, because I think for a long time the Packers have seen themselves as, guys who, in the receiver room, it's been somewhat of a committee. And I did wonder, in the past couple of years, what's going to happen when some of these guys are trying to get new deals, because obviously if you're a player in the NFL and you're trying to get your first big extension after your rookie deal, you're wanting to make as much money as possible. And the reality is that how you play, how many targets you get, how many yards you get, it's going to greatly affect how much money you make. And so I did wonder, how that would really result in the end with all these guys splitting a lot of opportunities between each other. And last year with Romeo Doubs, it's hard to know exactly what went down, but it had been reported by Bill Huber that Doubs was frustrated with his role, and that's why he skipped practice. Now, Doubs said that wasn't exactly the case, so it's hard to know for sure, but it seemed like something was up there. And I think Brian Gutekunst would have to know, if he came out and basically claimed Reed as the top receiver, that would probably lead to some kind of unnecessary drama publicly. And so I think the only reason he would actually come out and say this would be if the Packers are 100% sold that Jayden Reed is their future at receiver, and that they're going to prioritize him over giving new deals to Romeo Doubs or Christian Watson. Now, it's very possible that he did say this to them, and if that's the case, I'm just surprised he said it instead of keeping things a little bit more under the radar, because even if you, in your mind, if you're Gutekunst, that Reed's the guy, I just feel like you wouldn't want that information to get out, just because maybe it leads to some kind of it just makes you wonder what would happen in the locker room. Now, maybe nothing would happen. Maybe just all this public information never affects anything. But I don't think it would be crazy to think that it could affect, something. Just in looking at the past as what's happened with the receivers and what could be happening, going forward. Because all these guys obviously want to make money. And so that's where it's, I think, a hard balance between, being a team player, but then also at the same time, you're wanting to make as much money as possible in your next contract. So, as I said, I have no idea what actually happened in this meeting. It's very possible that Gutekunst did say that Reed is a top receiver. I just have a lot of doubts about Gutekunst being willing to come out and say that. And as I said, if he did, then that does really shift what the Packers have been saying for a long time the past couple of years. And the reason I just doubt it a little bit is just because when you look at some of these statistics, when you compare him to Romeo Doubs, it's not very clear who the top guy is. Now, if you look at overall yards, Reed does have that, but Doubs played in 4 less games. Doubs had more targets per game, 5.5 to Reed's 4.5. Doubs had a higher target percentage, 18.7% to Reed's 15.7%. Doubs had a higher first read target share. So the way the Packers are spreading out the ball, Doubs has been more heavily favored in that regard. Reed does have 50 receiving yards to Doubs' 46 receiving yards per game. And the one area where Jayden Reed is much better than Romeo Doubs is after the catch. There's no doubt about that. He has that speed, 7.33 yards after catch per reception versus Doubs' 3.2 yards after catch per reception. Reed did have a pretty massive drop percentage last year, 14.7% to Doubs' 7%. And the thing is, there are two totally different types of receivers. Reed's a slot guy. Doubs is an outside receiver. Doubs is more of he's not as much of a, big after the catch guy, where Reed has that speed and has that capability that Doubs doesn't have. So I do think they complement each other nicely. And just for me personally, looking ahead to 2025, I would like the Packers to bring back both of them. Obviously, Reed will be here regardless because he's still under contract for 2025 and 2026. But I guess, looking ahead to who gets a new contract, I would like to see Doubs and Jayden Reed here with Matthew Golden as well, because I just think they complement each other nicely. So I don't think that, they have to be, it's like, it's one guy or the other. Because they play such different roles, I could see both of them coming back. The thing is, when it comes to giving out this wide receiver money, how much do the Packers really want to pay a wide receiver? And adding Savion Williams and Matthew Golden to the mix does make you wonder things, because, I'd say the odds of, Watson, Dobbs, and Reed all being here in the future are very, very low. And so that's why I understand if you're Jayden Reed's agent, Rosenhaus, and probably even Jayden Reed himself, you probably wonder if this does change the way the Packers see you heading into the future. And so that would be my guess why this meeting happened, because these guys have to be looking out to the future and wondering, is my future in Green Bay? Should I potentially think about having to play elsewhere? And as I said, I don't think Gutekunst would just come out and say, yeah, you know what, you're not the guy anymore, or yeah, you're 100% our top guy, unless the Packers are very much wanting to ensure that Jayden Reed is happy. If they really want to pay him and make him the guy and give him a ton of money this offseason and pay him as one of the highest receivers in the NFL, then that would make sense for them to say, yeah, you're the top receiver. We want you to be happy here. We want you to stay around in Green Bay. That would make sense. So at the end of all this, I don't exactly know what went down. This could very well be true. It could very well not be true. I'm just giving you my reasons for why I would have some potential doubts as to maybe if things didn't go down exactly as this. And in a sense, I see how you could infer that from the scenario I played out, which, as I said, I don't know if that's the case. It's just me speculating here. But I just wanted to lay out sort of all that information and share my thoughts. At the end of the day, I personally think Dobbs is a better receiver than Jayden Reed in my mind overall. Like, if I had to pick one, I would pick Dobbs, just because I think he's better at getting open. I think the Packers should look his way more often, but no doubt Reed is better when it comes to after the catch. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens going forward with this receiver room, who gets paid, who doesn't get paid. But luckily, the Packers have a ton of talented receivers heading into 2025, and this may not be something that, we have to talk about a lot until maybe next offseason. But considering it did sort of affect things last year, seemingly with, Dobbs having to get suspended, we don't know what happened there exactly. It is something to watch going forward. But those are my thoughts. If you want more Packers content, feel free to subscribe down below, and I'll see you guys next time.